42% of Americans believe ghosts are real. Yup, not just in movies, but in real life, and that's just the beginning. Nearly 1 in 3 Americans sleep with their phone not next to it. With it, 25% of Americans think the sun revolves around the Earth. Galileo is crying. Only 13% of Americans can locate Ukraine on a map even after years of headlines. Over 40% of Americans say they've talked to their pets as if they were human. Some even expect a reply. Nearly 1 in 5 Americans believe Bigfoot is real. That's more than believe in the moon landing hoax. About 30% of Americans never read a book after high school, not even one. More than 50% of Americans don't know all 3 branches of government, but they know every Kardashian. 12% of Americans think HTML is a sexually transmitted disease. Let that sink in. Almost 70% of Americans say they've had a paranormal experience. Ghosts, shadows, voices, you name it. Over 60% of Americans can't name a single Supreme Court justice, but they can name all Avengers. 1 in 4 Americans believe climate change is a hoax, even during record-breaking heat waves. More than 80% of Americans don't floss daily. Dentists are crying in plaque. More than 60% of Americans don't know their blood type, but they know their Starbucks order. 15% of Americans have never left their home state, ever. Over 50% of Americans believe in aliens, and 10% think they've seen one. But wait, it gets weirder. 10% of Americans think chocolate milk comes from brown cows. That's not a joke. And 7% believe dinosaurs still exist somewhere. Jurassic Park wasn't just a movie, it's a lifestyle. Over 20% of Americans believe the government is hiding evidence of UFOs. Area 51 fans, rise up. More than 50% of Americans say they've had a dream that came true. Nearly 1 in 4 Americans believe astrology is scientifically accurate. Mercury in retrograde, anyone? Around 30% of Americans don't use sunscreen regularly, even in summer. Over 40% of Americans say they've cried at work. 60% of Americans don't have $500 saved for emergencies. 1 flat tire would guarantee financial crisis. 15% of Americans have used a dating app while in a relationship. More than 70% of Americans eat fast food at least once a week. 1 in 5 Americans believe vaccines cause autism, despite decades of scientific proof. Over 25% of Americans think climate change won't affect them personally. Nearly 40% of Americans say they've seen a ghost. About 10% of Americans think the moon landing was faked. More than 50% of Americans say they've Googled their own name. Over 60% of Americans believe in karma. Nearly 1 in 3 Americans say they've lied on a resume. Fake it till you make it? Which one shocked you the most? Drop your favorite stat in the comments or tell me one that's even crazier. And if you're watching this while holding your phone in bed, you're part of the 30%. Tag a friend who needs to see this, especially if they believe in aliens or brown cow milk.